I'm sorry for the strange setup that's going on here. Yes, I'm in my room, and this is the only spot I could find that you could I could have the camera sitting so I could talk. So, hello. It's been a really long time, and I'm sorry. And I said I was going to do like a holiday kind of video, and honestly at some point I still think I will because I really wanted to do that, but I also wanted to fit in something that that's just kind of been on my mind in general recently, and that is like feelings of guilt in recovery, and feeling like anything being easy in recovery means that you weren't actually sick enough, or not being able to keep fitting in restrictions, stuff like that means that you weren't sick enough, like all of that kind of stuff. Because I've just noticed recently, like throughout all of my recovery, like there have been definitely times where I just kind of get caught up in like this is too much, and like I'll slip back into old habits and that kind of thing. But in general, I find it very, very hard to really restrict too much, like even at all. Like even skipping breakfast or something like that, which to most people wouldn't really be a big thing, is really almost like impossible for me to do without compensating too much on the other end. And in the long run, it makes me feel really guilty. Like it makes me feel like you're not strong enough to keep restricting, like you don't have that kind of mental strength to kind of like follow through. You weren't actually ever that sick if you can't force yourself to keep kind of like falling back into restrictive habits. And I don't know if this is something that other people struggle with, but I struggle with it all of the time. So just to kind of address that, like I think it's a really toxic thought to associate certain aspects of recovery with not actually being sick enough, because that's certainly not true. And I think if you kind of like stop and break it down, which I'm trying to do right now, a lot of it is for myself too, so that I can kind of like break down why I feel like this and why it's not really, not that it's not valid, but why it's not weak to not be restricting. I think that what happens with me is, even if I have a thought, so even if I'm thinking in my head, like, skip this, say that you ate this even if you didn't, like, don't eat this or that, choose lowest calorie option, like, me even having those thoughts, like, even if I don't necessarily end up acting on them, like, even thinking about eating less later on will kind of send me into like a starvation mode response, like eat more than maybe I normally would kind of thing, which is amazing. Like that's how connected my mind is to my body, that my body responds to that just based on the thoughts. I know it's super weird and maybe that doesn't happen to other people, but I still really struggle with that. I feel like a lot of the times I end up feeling weak because of that, because I feel like, if you really were that dedicated to it, if you really wanted to make an effort to lose weight, like it would not be so easy for you to just like eat at every meal. And it's frustrating because mentally I do have all of those like bad body image, wanting to restrict, like wanting to cut back and like get like go back into that old feeling of like being at a really low weight. But I never end up being able to act on it. I think the reason is because I have gone 8 years of my life in such being underweight, being very restrictive, being secretive, like lying about what I've eaten, hiding food. 8 years is a really long time of being stuck in that cycle and being stuck in your head and not knowing how to break out of it because you're so terrified of what's going to happen on the other side. I still have those mental thoughts, and that's enough. Like that is me still struggling in recovery and still struggling with the eating disorder. I don't need to like hit some low weight to be deserving of like restarting recovery. I guess what I'm trying to say is like I feel like my inability to come close to restriction right now doesn't mean that I didn't have it in me. I know I have it in me. And it's the extent that I know I would go to restrict that prevents me from doing anything even close to that now. What I'm trying to do is change the dialogue. In my head, and for anyone else who kind of like struggles with this during recovery too, strength is not falling back into your relapse. It's not how much you can restrict in a day. Your brain telling you that is the eating disorder kicking in. And what strength actually is choosing, in spite of those thoughts, keeping myself on track with where I know I need to be in order to like keep moving forward, and moving towards the life that I want to have, that's free of eating disorder thoughts, free of these tendencies towards restriction. Like, that's what I want. So I hope that helps, and I will work on getting a holiday video up as soon as I can. But yeah, bye.